Let's discuss the NFL MVP race through 10 weeks, shall we? I'm Chris Hassel, and we have, well, one of the MVP voters. There's only 50 of them, and you're one of 50. Pete Prisco from CBS Sports. Pete, tell us a little bit more about what this voting process is like.
Well, late in the season, you get an email sent to you by AP, who kind of conducts the polling and does the emails to all the voters, and then you send in who your vote is. And it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You vote for one. It's not like you put them in order or anything and then they tally up the votes. You vote for one guy, and that's who your MVP is.
Are you allowed to talk to the other voters?
No.
Is that...
They don't, I mean, you can, but they encourage you to do it, and then they encourage you not to say who your vote is. But I usually, I don't say. I try not to. It's kind of, it's fun to, go to the honors ceremony and figure out who the MVP is. You can figure it out. It's usually pretty easy.
Right. Last year it was easy with Patrick Mahomes.
This year it's not easy at all.
Right. Well, who would be your vote right now through 10 weeks?
I lean to Russell Wilson for most of the season, but I'd probably go to Lamar Jackson right now.
Why is that?
I just think the way he's playing right now is a little bit better. I don't think Russell Wilson was very good the other night. He was okay. He wasn't great. And they did win the game. It's a tough road game, and you won it. But the way Lamar Jackson carved up the Patriots, I'd probably lean to that, him being the MVP.
Well, all 5 of the guys you see behind us are the 5 guys that we're putting in the top 5 right now. We're going to discuss all 5 of them and all 5 cases for an MVP right now. We got Pete's vote. He likes Lamar Jackson, but we also want to bring in a couple more of our CBS Sports NFL experts, 2-time Super Bowl champion Bryant Mcfadden and senior NFL writer Jonathan Jones. And Jonathan, we're going to start with you on this one. Just tell us quickly who would get your vote right now.
Right now, it'd have to be Lamar Jackson for the reasons that Pete just espoused. I mean, it's really 1 and 1A, and we're splitting hairs, and Russell Wilson, very deserving of that award right now. But when you talk about the best win on somebody's resume, it's absolutely Lamar Jackson over the Patriots, whereas Russell Wilson kind of gave the ball away there in overtime. And if Chase McLaughlin makes that kick, we're talking about a very different Seattle Seahawks team right now. So for me, as it stands today, it's Lamar Jackson.
Bryant, you agree with that? Is it Lamar for you at this point?
Nah, I disagree. These guys done got me fired up. It's too early for me to be getting fired up. We're talking about through 10 weeks, and they're telling me that Lamar Jackson would be the MVP if the season was to end today. No, that's crazy. Numbers don't lie. Russell Wilson has in total yards, right, just under 3,000 yards. Not to mention he has more total touchdowns than Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has more total turnovers than Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson has a better QBR than Lamar Jackson. Russell Wilson has been dominating from start to finish, and for you guys to sit here and say that if the season was to end today, Lamar Jackson should be the MVP, that is crazy. And yeah, Lamar Jackson had a huge win against the New England Patriots, but what else has he done? I mean, EK just said this past weekend up in the studios at Connecticut, Lamar Jackson is the biggest bully in the National Football League. When he's playing against a poor team that lacks talent, he goes and he balls out. And I'm not saying that he hasn't been consistent. Yes, Lamar Jackson has been consistent, but curly hair Russell Wilson has been balling. I mean, the numbers do not lie. And I think the biggest thing about Lamar Jackson, he has more entertaining plays. He has that wow factor week in and week out. He's so athletic. Granted, that's his skill set. But as far as numbers and looking at which players means more to their team, it's Russell Wilson.
When they played head-to-head, who won? Right? I mean, that end of argument B-Mac. Who won the game?
So that's what we're going to base this off of?
Well, he beat him at his place. He beat him at his place.
You can't sit here and...
That's a great point, though, Pete.
He beat him at his place. Russell Wilson threw a pick 6 in that game.
He didn't beat him at it. It was a team effort. I mean, what did Lamar Jackson do against Cleveland at home, right? I mean, Cleveland took the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson to the woodshed and chopped wood right in their house. So what are you talking about?
The New Orleans Saints went there with Teddy Bridgewater and beat Russell Wilson, too. I mean, you can do it all over. They're both really having really great seasons. But by no means is this thing decided.
Right now, Russell Wilson is the odds-on favorite,
yes.
But 2 out of 3 on our panel right here are going with Lamar Jackson. We're going to go through all 5 of our candidates right now. Let's begin with Christian McCaffrey, who opened at 80-1, is now 12-1 to win the MVP award. 3 straight 100-yard games. We'll have Jonathan start. Bryant, you can follow Jonathan, and Pete will follow Bryant. John?
Yeah, as it relates to Christian McCaffrey, he has to have a fantastic season in order to do this. He has to have a record-breaking season. He may be on his way, but the guys in front of him are just too good. And then also, the Panthers are probably going to miss the playoffs. If we have to bet on it right now, they probably are. And there has been no running back recently that has won this MVP award on a team that didn't even make the playoffs. When you look at LaDainian Tomlinson, when you look at Sean Alexander, and then, of course, Adrian Peterson, all of those teams that they were on went to the playoffs. So Christian McCaffrey can do what he's going to do, but if they don't make the playoffs and if these quarterbacks keep doing what they're doing, nah, don't believe in that.
Yeah, I'm right there with Jonathan. I mean, technically this is a quarterback award, and for Christian McCaffrey, he has to continue to play at a high level and do some crazy things as far as being productive, and also the team. They're 5-4 right now. I also agree with Jonathan. I believe they will miss the playoffs, but I can tell you this much. Christian McCaffrey has been a pleasure to watch. I mean, he has really put this entire team on his back, and they've benefited from his success. Not to mention he's been doing it with a quarterback that lacks experience. So just from that alone, I think he should be in this conversation, but I don't think he stands a chance to be able to win this award. When you look at the quarterbacks that are ahead of him and looking at how well they've played, no shot, but clearly he should be in the conversation.
Back in the old days, kids would show up for football practice, and they'd go, who wants to be the running back? And they'd all go, me, 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 me. Now when they show up, who wants to be the running back? Not me. We don't get paid.
Right.
We don't win MVPs.
Take a lot of hits.
And they take a lot of hits. No chance that this guy's ever winning the MVP with the group around him right now with the quarterbacks. No way.
Why is that? What is that? What do you mean? With the quarterbacks that are right now in the NFL?
It's just not a running back
award. Don't think the voters will go that way?
No, they won't. Unless you have this amazing 2,300-yard rushing season, you're not going, and he's having a great season. He's just not going to win the award. MVP is always a quarterback in my mind.
Adrian Peterson's the only one who's won MVP award from a running back position the last 14 years. So let's move on to the quarterbacks, and let's begin with Aaron Rodgers, Jonathan. Packers 8-2 for the first time since 2002.
Yeah, love what Aaron Rodgers is doing. He's having a fantastic season. It just so happens to be that he's the fourth best in the league right now at his position. Now, if I had to go out there and win a playoff game, I would probably pick Aaron Rodgers number 1 or number 2 with Patrick Mahomes right there. And then obviously you're going to be talking Tom Brady. But Aaron Rodgers isn't even playing up to the level that he played at for his 2 other MVP seasons. He's a little bit behind that. And then when you break it down, yeah, they're 8-2. But in those 10 games, 5 of those games, Aaron Rodgers has not accounted for more than a touchdown. And so he has 5 games with 1 or fewer touchdowns of those 10. And so because of that, we talked about consistency earlier with Lamar Jackson. Aaron Rodgers has not really presented that. He just had one hell of a game against Oakland.
Yeah, I mean, to start the season off, Aaron Rodgers got off to a very, very slow start. I mean, it was more so about the running game and the defense they were playing than the play of Aaron Rodgers. And then he woke up. You can tell he started to get familiar with the offense, get to understand what LaFleur loves to go to. And then he put up, over 300 yards against Kansas City, 3 touchdowns in Oakland, over 400 yards, 6 total touchdowns. For the last few weeks, we've seen pedestrian numbers from Aaron Rodgers. Against the Chargers, that horrible loss, 161 yards, 1 touchdown. And last week, I understand the conditions were not up to his standard, but granted, he plays in Green Bay, so he should be used to it. 233 yards and 0 touchdowns. It was more so about Aaron Jones and running the football and getting to the end zone than Aaron Rodgers' arm. So looking at the other quarterbacks that we will talk about, I don't think Aaron Rodgers right now, he has a shot.
If you look at his numbers, they're not that far off from everybody else.
Well, he had that one huge game.
But you look at his body of work, it's not that far off from the other guys, and yet he's not being mentioned in the same breath with those guys. I have a sneaky suspicion by the time we get to week 13, 14, 15, he's going to be in the same conversation with him. He just now started to roll. He did have that bad game against the Chargers, but they got beat up on the offensive line. His numbers are pretty darn good. He told me before the season that he thought maybe if he threw 39 touchdown passes, he'll throw 4 or 5 interceptions. I said 9 or 10. He's probably right. He's only got 2.
Didn't you have him as one of your MVP candidates?
I had him as the MVP.
He was your MVP before the season.
Yes, and I still think he has a chance to win it.
Absolutely in the mix right now. Let's move on to Deshaun Watson, quarterback of the Houston Texans. A huge matchup this week against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Jonathan?
Absolutely love Deshaun Watson, what he's been able to put together. Talk about model of consistency. When you look at his first year that was cut short by injury, this previous season, and now this year, not only are his numbers pretty much the same in terms of percentages, in terms of average yards per attempt, he is absolutely crushing, and he keeps his team in the game, and that's what he has always done. Going back to Gainesville High Red Elephants when he was leading his high school team, they were always in games, and then at Clemson, and then obviously here with the Texans. One time since high school has he lost by more than one possession. That has continued. Pete, you mentioned it just a second ago, though. It's going to be about what's ahead of Deshaun Watson. The Texans have games versus Baltimore this week, Indianapolis, and then New England. So as it stands right now, Deshaun Watson is firmly my number 3. But talk to me in 3 weeks after those 3 games and what he may or may not do in those games, and he absolutely can vault himself up to number 1.
Yeah, I agree. The next 3 weeks for me, this will be a MVP-like gauntlet for Deshaun Watson. He can either gain traction or lose traction based on his production and based on wins and losses. But when we're looking at Deshaun Watson, I mean, I tip my hat to the kid because he's a big-time baller. Out of all the quarterbacks we're talking about, Deshaun Watson probably has the worst offensive line in front of him, and he does so much. And he already had an MVP-like moment. This highlight here, well, in this ball game against the Raiders, actually that play right there, I mean, getting kicked in the face, being able to evade defenders and find a way to hit the open pass catcher in the end zone. I mean, he's an outstanding player. And if I didn't know any better, I thought Deshaun Watson was still at Clemson, looking at some of the highlights he's been able to do against some of these professional defenders he's going against week in and week out.
Here's what he has to do, and Jonathan mentioned it. Go beat the Ravens this week. Beat the guy who's number 1 on our MVP list right now, and then you vault yourself into the same conversation. I give him a lot of credit. He's taken a beating over the years. His offensive line, as B-Mac mentioned, has been awful. It's getting better, and he's getting better. Now, he's held the ball, so he's been accountable for a lot of those sacks as well, but he is improving. The line is improving. But go beat the Ravens this week. Then we'll start talking about you as the MVP.
A lot of coverage on CBS Sports HQ from that game this week. Jonathan, you are going to be at that matchup as we move on, previewing again the MVP race through 10 weeks. Lamar Jackson at the top for 2 of you. Pete and Jonathan have Lamar Jackson as the MVP at this point. Big matchup against the Texans.
It really is, and you know, when we talk about Lamar, we talk about Russell Wilson. You kind of have to, you have to put those two against one another. I don't want to do that because they are 2 fantastic quarterbacks. But that's what this is when we're splitting hairs. When you look at what Lamar has done, Pete, you made the point earlier. He won the head-to-head. Now, was Russell Wilson guarding Lamar Jackson? No. Did they both essentially account for the same amount of offense? They absolutely did. However, Russell Wilson threw that pick 6 to Marcus Peters, so take that 7 points that he scored for his offense off the board, and that's what gives me the edge in that head-to-head. And then we also look at Lamar Jackson. He has the best win over New England, where he did not allow the New England Patriots to come back despite a muff punt when we all said, oh, there go the Patriots. He pushed that lead further and further there in the 4th quarter. Meanwhile, Russ's best win came in overtime when he threw a goal line interception. And so when I look at Lamar Jackson, when I see what he's doing on the ground as well, where he's about to break Michael Vick's single-season rushing record for a quarterback in Week 12. He's going to have a quarter of the season left to just push that record where no one else can touch it. You add all that stuff up. B-Mac, you made the point earlier. Russell Wilson is ahead of Lamar Jackson in almost every passing category, and I do not disagree. The facts are the facts, but when you put his rushing totals in there, along with Russell Wilson's, they are neck and neck when you talk about yards and points that they are accounting for. Lamar Jackson, just by a hair, is ahead of Russell Wilson for me.
Well, you guys know where I stand with Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson, but I can't deny talent. I cannot deny entertainment. If I didn't know any better, I thought Lamar Jackson was still playing college football. I mean, he's making defenders look so slow. I mean, he's making them look like they don't know exactly what they're doing, and he's been able to do it week in and week out. And like I said, he has the wow factor with him. Anytime you watch Lamar Jackson, if you're sitting down, you will stand up at some point in time. And he's been able to revolutionize the quarterback position. I mean, he's like playing, NFL Jam on the arcade with the arcade controller, where you can just make guys move and jump at any given time. That's who Lamar Jackson is. And I think, he still has a lot to gain as far as the MVP. In my opinion, But he is right there, but I'm not quite ready to put him above Russell Wilson. But anything can change. It's a big weekend between the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens on CBS this Sunday. So who knows what he has in store. But I can tell you this much. I love watching Lamar Jackson, and I would hate to play against Lamar Jackson.
I prefer my quarterbacks in the pocket, so I was a little hesitant to come around to Lamar Jackson. I've come around. He's improved as a passer. The one thing you watch him and he can stand in the pocket. He's made a lot of throws from inside the pocket. The next step for him will be when he doesn't run the way he runs. It happens to all of them. We've seen all these guys burst onto the scene and they run around, but eventually you slow down. You don't get faster as you get older. Believe me, I can tell you that from experience. You get slower as you get older, and he will slow down, and the run game, part of his game, will go away.
Well, that's not going to be for at least another
but
6, 7 years.
It will eventually
right?
go away. And when it goes away, you have to be able to play conventional quarterback. And from what I've seen from him this year, he's made big strides in that direction, and I don't think it's going to be a problem.
No quarterback in NFL history has ever thrown for over 3,000, rushed for over 1,000. Right now he's on pace for 3,600 and 1,200. He would blow that record out of the water.
Not bad for a guy who said he didn't want to run the ball anymore. Remember
exactly.
Before the season?
Boy, that run against the Bengals last week, incredible stuff. Moving on to the odds-on MVP favorite, Russell Wilson, coming off that victory over the 49ers on Monday Night Football, the first loss of the season for San Francisco. Jonathan, you were there. You saw it firsthand.
I love Russell Wilson. I think that he has long deserved an MVP vote. It baffles the mind that he has not done it just yet. I've said this before. Listen, for the longest time, we all said, look at Russell's defense. Yeah, he's playing great, but look at that defense. That defense is not that defense. Now, Jadeveon Clowney is doing everything that he can to bring it back to those early 2010s level. But what Russ is doing right now, how few turnovers that he is accounting for. Obviously, he had the interception there in overtime. Obviously, he had that fumble. Mcfadden, you got to go down, big fella. That cost them 6 points there. But Russ is out here doing it with a few guys that you've never really heard of. Obviously, Josh Gordon's getting back in the mix. We all heard about the talk about DK Metcalf, and he's proving a lot of people wrong with that third-round selection. I love what Russ is doing, and he can continue to do it. And if this Seahawks team, honestly, if they go 14-2, that means that they went 8-0 on the road. That means that they lost to Teddy Bridgewater's Saints at home. They probably should have won that game. But that also means that in Week 17, what may be the Sunday Night Football game in Seattle, that they would have beaten the San Francisco 49ers not once but twice. And so then it becomes extremely, extremely difficult to say, nah, Russ, we can't give you the MVP. And so when I put all that together, what he has done so far and what he can possibly do moving forward, when you trust what Russell Wilson always does after Thanksgiving, moving into the colder months, yeah, I understand why he is on the fast track to the MVP.
Well, he's my MVP right now. A lot can change in the next few weeks, but Russell Wilson has been so consistent. If you put that graphic back up where he ranks as far as, NFL quarterbacks, anytime you see 1, 2, and things like that, he's one of the best out there. I mean, first in passing touchdowns, tied for second in interceptions with 2. I mean, first in pass rating and fourth pass yards. Granted, they have a nice balance attack going on, but this is a guy that has done a lot. And I disagree with you guys when you said Lamar Jackson, that win against the New England Patriots was more impressive. How? Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, they were playing at home. Russell Wilson took his home show on the road to San Francisco, played against the best defensive line unit in the National Football League, and consistently made play after play. Yes, it was a costly interception. I do agree with you guys. But guess what? When given the opportunity again, he was able to drive his football team down the field for a game-winning field goal attempt, and he has delivered. Curly hair Russell Wilson has been on fire. I mean, he's the ultimate lead singer for any R&B group, and he's been balling from start to finish. And like I said, if the season was to end today, give curly hair Russell Wilson that mic, and we're going to win a ball game.
He's been phenomenal, and I think he's been held back at times by this team. When you look at what they do and what they think they can do, they think they're still a run team. They still think they're playing dominant defense. Now, they were dominant on the front against San Francisco, so yeah, it showed up there. But for the most part, they haven't been as good on defense. I wonder what he would do if they just said, here you go, Russ, go play. Because he's clearly improved as a passer. He's clearly improved his ability to see the field. I shudder to think what this guy could do if he was allowed to play much more up-tempo, because he would put up unreal numbers.
Well, all three of you have the same top two. Now, the order is a little bit different. Pete and Jonathan like Lamar Jackson as the MVP. Bryant likes Russell Wilson as the MVP. It's pretty much right now the two guys at the top, and then you kind of differ for numbers 3, 4, and 5. Rodgers, McCaffrey. At this point, there's a few guys. Deshaun Watson still out there, but right now
Kirk
it seems
Cousins.
like it's a
Dare I say it?
If he
He's
keeps
in the mix.
if he keeps
He's
playing
in the
this
mix.
way, he's been the best quarterback in the NFL since week 5.
No.
No?
Don't throw Kirk Cousins' name in there just yet, Pete. Stop that.
Believe me, it pains me to say it.
Don't do that to
you've
Christian
heard me
McCaffrey.
talk about him, but he's in it.
That's what I'm saying. How you just go overlook CMC like that? Christian McCaffrey, you just biased against running backs, Pete. You just stop that.
I am.
Fellas, thank you so much. We're 10 weeks in. We have 7 more to go. The MVP race really heating up. Pete Prisco has a vote, but we also value the opinions of Jonathan and Bryant. Thanks for watching, everybody.